I found my mother's hidden diary while packing up our childhood home. What I read inside destroyed everything I thought I knew about my parents, our family, and my own past. A pipe burst above my childhood bedroom the week after Christmas. Classic New England timing. The temperature dipped, the copper sighed, and the ceiling decided it had had enough of pretending to be solid. I'd come home to help my mom pack because she was finally selling the house downsizing, she said, so I don't keep feeding a furnace and a raccoon. The raccoon was theoretical. The furnace, unfortunately, was not. I was standing on the second step of the attic ladder, holding my phone flashlight in my teeth like a miner, when I saw the cardboard tower. Every family has one. The stack of boxes that migrates with you through life like barnacles on a ship. These had been there since I was 12. Seasonal, books, misc, a terrifying taxes do not throw away, and one that just said recipes in my mother's tidy Catholic school handwriting. I grabbed a plastic storage bin from another box and put it under the drip, but the recipes box caught my eye. It was damp on one corner, the kind of damp that turns paper into lasagna sheets. My mom was downstairs talking to a plumber about his emergency Saturday fee, like he'd invented inflation, so I dragged recipes into the light to keep it from getting ruined. This, I told myself, was a good deed, a future thank you pie. Inside, index cards, clippings from magazines with aggressively 90s food photography, spices that had become fossils and tucked between a best bean dip leaflet and a church bake sale program, a black moleskin notebook, elastic band long since surrendered to entropy. It wasn't labeled. My mother labels everything. Flour, sugar, extension cords, the freezer drawer that says meat, like a warning. The absence of a label felt like a typo in her personality. I shouldn't have opened it. I know that. I didn't mean to. The cover flipped in my hands when I lifted it, gravity doing what the part of my brain that respects privacy should have done. First page, top right corner, January 3rd. No year. The handwriting wasn't tidy, not like her lists. It was loopier, quick, like someone jogging and writing at the same time. I made soup and didn't say anything. The onions turned sweet because I waited. I wish I could teach myself that trick in other parts of life. Wait long enough and the sharp things get soft. It was my mother's voice and not. The lyricism was new, like hearing a relative sing and realizing they could always do that, and you just didn't know. I flipped again. I didn't plan to kiss him. That makes it worse, not better. If I planned it, maybe there would be a reason that feels dignified. I didn't. It happened, and then I let it keep happening, which is just a different kind of plan. I closed the journal so fast the elastic, what was left of it, snapped against my thumb. My heart started doing that thing where it tries to disassociate from your body. I stared at the cardboard flap, the attic dust motes, the water plinking into the bin. Somewhere below me, my mother laughed, high and thin. The plumber had told her a joke or a price. I told myself it could be anything. Fiction, a writing exercise, the melodrama of a woman who used to underline magazine articles about reinvention with a pen. My mother isn't melodramatic. She's practical to a moral fault. She will tape a broken spatula before she buys a new one. She stacks coupons like origami. I opened the journal again. He said, "You look tired," which is the kindest thing anyone has said to me in months because it means he could see me. I laughed. I said, "I'm fine," like a person who has read the manual. He shook his head. "No, you're tired," he said, and leaned his forehead against mine like a prayer. This is where some people would put the book down and never look again. I am not some people. I am the middle child who learned to read subtext because my brother and sister only read headlines. I am the one who shopped with mom at Aldi and noticed when she started buying the good butter just because. I am the kid who watched my father move through rooms like a weather system, sometimes sunny, sometimes gone, and noticed my mother resetting the table after he left, like she could rearrange the day. I kept reading because I was already falling. The entries weren't daily, they were bursts. Weeks apart sometimes, then 3 in a week. They didn't have dates at first. Later they did. The first one with a year, April 14th, 2009. I was 13 then. 13 is a year you remember because your bones don't quite fit, and everyone else's jokes hurt more than they should. 13 was also the year Dad took a job 2 towns over. Less overtime, he said. More dinners, he said. We got more dinners. We got fewer stories. He went quiet in a way that sounded like sleep. April 14th, 2009. I don't know where to put this, so I'll put it here with the cinnamon stains. He met me at the library after closing. We reshelved the returns, and he read me the last page of the book I said I didn't have time for. "You'll want to know how it ends," he said. I wanted to say, "I already know how it ends." I didn't. I put the journal down on the attic floor and stared at it like it might explode. The library? Of course. My mother has worked at the public library since before I had a library card. The stacks are her church. He could be anyone, a coworker, a patron, the man who came in every Thursday to ask for DVDs about World War II and then talk at the circulation desk for an hour about submarines. She always called him Mr. Submarine. The thought of Mr. Submarine leaning his forehead against my mother's made me bark out a laugh that sounded like a cough. I flipped more. The church program paper cut my finger. The irony wasn't lost on me. May Stout. He asked me if I ever think about leaving. I told him leaving isn't the same as arriving. He said, "You speak in recipes." I said, "So do you." We laughed because it was easier than answering. June 9th. It rained all day and I told the kids it was a baking day. We made the brownies your father likes, and I cried into the sink when no one was looking. It's ridiculous. I never cry. Tears are for weddings and onions. But I stood there and cried because I didn't know where to put the wanting. It gets in the cabinets if you're not careful. You find it years later behind flour. I closed the book and sat on the attic floor, knees up, journal between my feet like it might run. I remember that day. Maybe not the date, but the brownies. Dad said they were perfect, took two, and fell asleep during a Red Sox game, his mouth open like a cave. My mother wiped the brownie crumbs from his shirt like she was polishing a trophy. I watched from the stairs, feeling weird and in love with them and annoyed and hungry and 13. Am I supposed to tell you that I stormed down the ladder and screamed? That I marched to the kitchen, held the journal up like a warrant, and demanded answers? I didn't. I am the child of this house. Confrontation is last on the list after make coffee and check the weather. I put the journal back in the box. I put the box farther from the leak. I went downstairs and asked my mother if she wanted tea. She said yes, the way she always says yes because it is one of her languages. The plumber left with half my mother's savings and the smell of basement on his boots. Mom settled at the kitchen table with her notepad and her calculator. The house's finances are a living thing to her. She believes if you remember enough numbers, you can keep the roof up by sheer force of accounting. I watched her mouth the sums. Mortgage, utilities, repairs, a margin for unexpected. She writes unexpected as if it's a line item that will cooperate. I made tea and stared at her hands. There's a burn scar on her right wrist from the time she forgot the oven mitt. There's a nick on her left index finger from cutting bagels too fast. I tried to imagine those hands holding someone's face that wasn't my father's. I failed and succeeded at the same time and hated both results. "Everything okay?" she asked without looking up. "Yeah," I lied without thinking. "Do you want me to go through the attic and see what's ruined?" She sighed. "We can toss most of it. Your grandmother's lamps? Gone. The box of postcards? Keep. The recipe box? God forbid anything happens to the recipe box." She looked up and smirked like we were in on a joke. "Half those recipes are lies anyway. I wrote down the wrong measurements so Aunt Teresa wouldn't copy my lasagna." I snorted. The pettiness comforted me in a way that felt like a betrayal of something else. "You're a monster." She smiled, then went serious. "There's a black notebook in there. If you find it, bring it down." My spine did the opposite of what spines are supposed to do. "A notebook?" "My journal," she said matter-of-factly, like she was telling me where we keep the powdered sugar. I keep thinking I should burn it, but burning things is against policy and also a fire hazard. "The journal in the recipe box," I said, as if clarifying would change anything. She blinked and then frowned like she was trying to remember if she had been that obvious. "It keeps the right company," she said finally. "People leave you alone if they think you're just a list." "Do you want me to read it?" I asked. I don't know why I asked. Curiosity is a train that doesn't stop for your better angels once it leaves the station. She shook her head once. "No." The kettle clicked, and the radio in the corner muttered about a low-pressure system off the coast. My mother drew a line through plumber on her list like she'd completed a quest. "If we can get through February," she said, "we can get through anything." I went upstairs and did not bring her the notebook. I brought it to my old bedroom and shut the door and sat on the floor, where the carpet still remembers the shape of me at 16. I opened the book again, because I am a coward and a daughter, and because the gravity of secrets is real. July 1st. We made a plan to make no plans. He laughed. I laughed. Plans laugh at you. July 12th. The air tasted like copper today. He called from a payphone like we were spies. I stood in the produce aisle repeating the names of fruits so I wouldn't say his name out loud. "Yes, 2 pounds of peaches," I told the clerk, and meant none of it. August 3rd. Your father brought home roses. They were red and beautiful, and I almost hated them for being proof of something I couldn't name. Men bring flowers when they're sorry or when they're performing the idea of husband. He is good. He is trying. I am a terrible person for wanting something else while he is being good. But wanting happens to you. It doesn't ask permission. I stopped to let my brain catch up with my eyes. The journal wasn't written like a teenager's confessional. It wasn't breathless. It wasn't cruel. It was careful, like someone carrying a glass across a crowded room. There were entries about me and my siblings, too mundane and loving in a way that ached. My first driving test, fail, thanks to the curb. My brother's SAT tutor, robbery in khakis. My sister's role in the school play. She thinks the stage is oxygen. A recipe for banana bread written like a truce to herself. And then September 22nd. We said goodbye in the parking lot behind the hardware store because we're unoriginal and cowards. He said, I don't like who I am in this story. I said, me neither. We laughed and it sounded like breaking. You're not unhappy, he said, meaning my life. You're just tired. I wanted to tell him tiredness can be a kind of drowning. Instead, I said, I made soup. He said, of course you did. We didn't touch. I stood there and felt the air move around us like the rest of the world had agreed to keep the secret a little longer. I went home and your father asked if the car was making a funny sound. I said, yes, a little. He said he'd take a look. I set the journal down and pressed my fists against my eyes so hard, little constellations burst behind my lids. I tried to remember my father in September 2009. He was rebuilding a deck for a neighbor and came home with a splinter in his palm that my mother removed with tweezers and a look that could sterilize steel. He kissed her forehead when she was done and said, thank you, like he meant it. Did any of it mean it? I wanted the villain to be obvious. I wanted this to be clean. It wasn't. My mother didn't read like a villain. She read like a person who had been handed all the right pieces for the wrong puzzle and found a corner piece that didn't belong and held it near her heart for a while. The last entry on that first pass was dated November 18th. He moved. Far enough that the drives wouldn't be accidental anymore. He said he needed to save his marriage. I told him he was already saving it. We stood in the library stacks and stared at the gap where the book we loved had been. Someone else had checked it out. I hope they read it all the way through. I went home and put a new jar of nutmeg in the cabinet. For Thanksgiving. For the sweet things. For the things that make houses smell like decisions. I closed the journal and lay back on the carpet, both hands on my face. The radiator ticked. Somewhere down the block, a snowplow made the sound of metal arguing with pavement. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. How's your mom? Pipe fixed? I stared at the words long enough for them to go abstract. I don't know why secrets choose the days they do. If my mother hadn't asked for the notebook, I might have convinced myself it was fiction. If the pipe hadn't burst, I might have never opened the box. If the label had said anything but recipes, I might have left it alone. If. I sat up and wiped my face and considered bringing the journal downstairs, putting it on the table between the good butter and the budget and saying, here, I found your other life. But I didn't. Not because I wanted to protect her, though maybe that was in it, but because part of me wanted to know the whole of it before I made it real in her mouth. So I slid the notebook under my hoodie and walked back to the attic. I rearranged the boxes like I was a burglar at a museum returning the one stolen thing. I kept the black book and told myself I would read just a little, just enough to understand, just enough to decide whether to set the house on fire or learn how to live in it differently. I know how that sounds. I know what it makes me. But I also know the feeling of standing in a kitchen that smells like cinnamon and not knowing whether you're the good person or the person who needs to know more to decide. That night, after we ate leftovers and argued about whether the plumber had been reasonable, he had been a plumber, my mother fell asleep on the couch with a book open on her chest. I watched her breathe. I watched the way the lines at the corners of her mouth softened. She looked exactly like my mother, and absolutely like someone I didn't know at all. I went to my old room, shut the door, put the journal on my lap, and opened to the next page. Because if there's one thing I'd learned in this house, it's that you can pretend a leak isn't there for a while, but eventually the ceiling hits the floor, and I needed to know what had already fallen. When I opened the journal again that night, it felt less like snooping and more like trespassing. The words on the page weren't just sentences, they were footprints, leading me into a part of my mother's life I was never meant to walk through. I told myself I'd read only a few more pages, just enough to understand who he was. Just enough to satisfy the gnawing curiosity that had already eaten through my resolve. The early entries were vague. They hinted at emotions, at moments, at fleeting touches that could still be chalked up to imagination. But the more I read, the less ambiguous it became. December 2nd. He brought me a coffee, just the way I like it. No sugar, too much cream. He remembered from that one time I joked about it being coffee-flavored milk. Your father forgets how I take mine every single morning. He doesn't mean to. He just doesn't see me the way this man does. I froze at that line. I could see my dad in the kitchen, pouring coffee like it was a daily task on an endless checklist. Not something that required thought. He always drank his black. My mom always added cream. I never once thought about whether he remembered. I flipped further. January 14th. I told myself it was just the winter, that I was lonely because of the cold, that when spring came I'd feel warm enough at home. But then he smiled at me in the staff room, and I knew spring wasn't going to fix anything. The staff room. My chest tightened. That narrowed the suspect pool. My mother worked at the library. He wasn't just some patron. He was someone on staff. Someone I probably knew by face, if not by name. And then I saw it. February 9th. Martin said he wished we had met at a different time, a different life. I laughed because that's what people say when they're really saying, I wish we could stop pretending. Martin. The name hit like a punch. I remembered Martin. He was the assistant librarian when I was a teenager. Balding, perpetually tired. The kind of man who smelled faintly of paper and peppermint gum. He'd once helped me print out a science project when the computer froze, muttering curses at the ancient machine under his breath. I hadn't thought about him in years. Martin. I sat back, staring at the word. My mom and Martin. The entries weren't daily confessions of guilt. They were careful, coded in metaphor sometimes, brutally blunt at others. March 5th. He asked me what I wanted. I told him I wanted to stop wanting. He kissed my hand like I was someone worth longing for. I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't. April 20th. We said it was the last time. We said it before and after. We'll say it again, I'm sure. The thing about endings is they need beginnings to mean anything. And beginnings are too easy with him. By then, my palms were sweaty against the paper. I could picture her writing these lines at the kitchen table after everyone went to bed. The overhead light humming, her pen scratching fast so she wouldn't lose her nerve. I thought about 2009. I thought about my father, home less often, working those endless shifts. I thought about my mom, always fine, always busy, always filling silence with chores. I thought about how normal everything had seemed, and how much of it had apparently been a performance. The more I read, the more my childhood memories started to warp, like Polaroids exposed to too much heat. I remembered nights when Dad was late, and Mom ran errands after dinner, leaving us kids with each other. I remembered coming home from school and finding her humming in the kitchen, flushed in a way I now couldn't interpret as just busy. Had Martin been there, just outside my field of vision? Had the reality of my life been shifting around me without my ever noticing? One entry stopped me cold. June 18th. Your father fixed the sink today. He was so proud. He put his arm around me and said, "See, you don't need to call the plumber." I laughed and kissed him and thought about how my life is full of men trying to fix things. One fixes sinks, the other fixes me. And I'm ashamed for needing either. It wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about the way she saw us all. Her marriage, her children, herself. I should have stopped. I should have closed the book, shoved it back in the attic, and pretended I never saw it. But I didn't. I read until my eyes burned, until the words blurred. I read until I couldn't tell if I was angry at her, at Martin, or at myself for being complicit in the silence of our family. Because that's what it was, wasn't it? Silence. She wrote it all down, but never said it out loud. And we lived in the silence like fish in water, never realizing we were drowning in it too. The last entry I read before slamming the book shut was dated September 29th, 2011. It's over. For real this time. He transferred to another branch. Said it was for his career, but I know it was for his marriage. I told him I understood. I told him thank you. Thank you for the years. Thank you for the reminder that I'm still alive. Thank you for showing me the difference between being seen and being watched. And now I will go back to being good. I will bake, and I will smile, and I will say, I am fine. And maybe I will be. Maybe the lie will become true again. The pen mark trailed off the page like she couldn't bring herself to write more. And that was it. Or maybe not. Maybe the notebook wasn't finished. Maybe it was just the last page she dared to write. I closed it, my chest aching, my head spinning. Because the thing about discovering a secret isn't just what you learn. It's how it rewrites everything you thought you already knew. That night, I lay in my childhood bed, the journal under my pillow like contraband, and realized I'd never look at my parents the same way again. Because now every smile, every argument, every moment of normal was infected with the possibility of something else, something hidden, something written in a notebook buried in a recipe box. And I had no idea what to do with that knowledge. When I woke up the next morning, the first thing I saw was the corner of the black notebook sticking out from under my pillow. For a moment, half asleep, I thought it was a dream, the water leak, the recipes box, the confessions written in looping ink. Then I pulled it out, held it in my hands, and felt the weight. It was real. And now, so was the secret. I tried to resist it. I put the journal in my backpack, zipped it shut, and told myself I'd leave it alone. I went downstairs, made coffee for Mom, listened to the news droning about traffic and storms. But the entire time, my head buzzed with the knowledge that the diary was only 10 feet away. My mom sat across from me at the table, scribbling notes in her ledger, tapping her pen against the paper when numbers didn't add up. She looked like herself, the same woman who clipped coupons, who checked the expiration dates on everything, who scolded me for leaving the milk out. But now, with every little gesture, I wondered what part of her was herself, and what part was the version of her that she let us see. I couldn't stand it. I took the backpack upstairs, opened it, and began again. The journal jumped forward after 2011. Whole years were missing. For a moment, I thought that was the end, that she had stopped writing altogether. But halfway through, the ink returned. The handwriting had changed, tighter, smaller, as though she was forcing herself to be controlled. March 2014. I saw him today, just for a moment. He was at the grocery store, older, balder, carrying a child's hand. He didn't see me. I left my cart in the aisle and walked out. The longing was immediate, like a flame catching dry leaves. Years gone and it was still there. What does that say about me? About the life I've lived? I slammed the book closed, heart hammering. Martin wasn't gone. He was still out there, still haunting her life in small ways. And worse, she was still thinking about him. As I kept reading, a pattern formed. Every few months, another sighting, another run-in, another entry that made me question what over really meant. June 2015. Your father and I went to a wedding. He drank too much, told the same jokes 3 times, fell asleep on the couch when we got home. I sat on the porch alone, and all I could think about was how Martin used to walk me to my car, how he'd stand there until I drove away. He made leaving feel like arriving. How cruel that I can't erase that memory. October 2016. He sent me an email. Just one line. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. It wasn't just a double life in the past. It was seeping into the present. Even in silence, even with years gone by, Martin was a ghost in the house. I started replaying my own life like a film reel, searching for his shadow. The times Mom was late at the library. The times she was distracted at dinner, stirring pasta sauce too long, staring out the window while the noodles went soft. The vacations we didn't take because money was tight. The holidays where she smiled too brightly, like she was trying to convince herself of something. It all seemed poisoned now. Even Dad, steady, quiet Dad, looked different in hindsight. I wondered if he'd known, if he'd chosen not to know. The next entries grew darker, more bitter. July 2017. Your father said he loves me. He says it often now. I don't know when it started feeling like a script. Maybe it's me. Maybe it's because I know what it felt like when Martin said it. That's the curse, isn't it? Once you've known the difference, you can't unknow it. November 2018. I had a dream about him. Woke up and your father was snoring beside me. I felt like I'd betrayed him twice. Once in reality, once in my sleep. I got up and baked banana bread at 3 a.m. It came out dry. Even her baking, the thing she was famous for in our family, was tied up in this. Suddenly, I didn't want to eat another slice of pie again. The entry that broke me was dated February 2020. He called again. I answered. I don't know why. We talked about nothing. Weather, work, books. He asked if I was happy. I told him yes. It was a lie. He knew it. He asked if I ever thought about what could have been. I said, every day. I shouldn't have said it, but I did. Every day. I closed the book, shoved it under my bed, and sat there, shaking. It wasn't just a fling. It wasn't just a mistake that happened a decade ago. It was a thread woven through my entire life, tugging at every memory until the whole tapestry unraveled. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand, how could you smile at us while you wrote these words? How could you tell Dad you loved him when you were still dreaming about someone else? But I didn't. I sat there in silence, the way she had for years. Because once you open the door to a double life, you realize you're already living in it too. It happened late one night when we were packing. I'd been carrying the diary like it weighed 100 pounds. And finally, without planning, I asked my mother straight out, who is Martin? She froze. No denial, no fake confusion. Just a pause, then, where did you see that name? I put the journal on the table. She sighed, sat down, and for the first time in my life, I saw her look like she'd run out of scripts. Yes, she admitted. I loved him, years ago, too long. I pressed her. When, how long, why? She didn't flinch. She said it started when she felt invisible at home, when Dad buried himself in work, when she was tired of being useful, but unseen. She said Martin made her feel noticed. She called it shameful, ordinary, stupid, and real. Did Dad know? I asked. Not the details, she said. Maybe enough to be kind. That answer burned. It meant Dad had lived half aware, patching leaks without naming the flood. I wanted to scream, but the truth pinned me down. She insisted she had ended it years ago, that Martin was just a memory who once called again, but she hadn't acted on it. Still, she admitted she'd thought about leaving every day, even as she made pancakes and wrapped gifts and smiled at us. You kept a journal, I said bitterly. I had to, she said. Otherwise the shame would rot me. The house was silent except for the radiator ticking. I asked her what she wanted me to do with it. Tell Dad, destroy it, keep it. She looked exhausted. Whatever you choose, just don't turn me into something simple. I was both a good mother and a liar. Both are true. That night I lay awake, the book on the desk like a black hole. My mother's confession hadn't collapsed the house, but it had changed the gravity inside it. Nothing stood where it used to. The morning after the confrontation, the house felt heavier. as if every chair, drawer, and framed picture knew something it hadn't known the day before. I couldn't look at my mother without replaying her confession, but I also couldn't look away. It was like staring at a wound, morbid, but impossible not to check if it was still bleeding. For 2 days, I kept the journal hidden in my room, under my mattress like a teenager with contraband. Every time I tried to sleep, I'd hear the faint scrape of the elastic against cardboard, as though the book wanted to remind me it was still there. The real question wasn't whether I believed her, she'd admitted too much for denial, but what to do next. Tell Dad? Keep quiet? Pretend ignorance? Each option was a form of betrayal, just aimed in different directions. My sister was the first person I told. I drove to her apartment, clutching the diary in my lap the entire way. When I spilled everything, she didn't ask if it was true. She just kept repeating, "Oh my God," until her voice was hoarse. Then she poured 2 glasses of cheap red wine and said the sentence that had been haunting me already. "So, do we tell Dad?" I stared at the glass in my hand. If we do, it might ruin their marriage. She shook her head. It already ruined their marriage. We're just pretending not to see the wreckage. My brother took the news differently. He went silent, then immediately shifted into problem-solving mode, like this was just another business case study. He asked for dates, timelines, specific evidence. If Dad finds out, he'll want the facts straight. He deserves the details, he said, like he was drafting a deposition. I envied his ability to distance himself. I couldn't. For me, every line in that journal had rewired a memory. Family vacations, Christmas mornings, even the sound of our parents' laughter in the kitchen late at night. Were they laughing about us, or about the secret? The breaking point came the following weekend, when Dad came over to help haul more boxes to storage. He was sweaty, cheerful in his quiet way, humming off-key as we wrestled furniture through narrow doorways. Watching him bend to tie down a mattress with a ratchet strap, I felt physically ill. This man, who'd patch-skinned knees and paid every bill and stood in the rain at soccer games, had been living alongside a truth no one had the courage to give him. That night, I sat in the driveway with the engine off, rehearsing how it might sound. "Dad, Mom cheated years ago. I only know because I found her diary. She says it's over. I don't know if it matters that it's over." But the words clung to my throat like barbed wire. Instead, I went back inside and slammed the diary on the kitchen counter in front of my mother. "I can't keep this anymore," I told her. "I'm not your accomplice. Either you tell him, or I will." Her face crumpled in a way I'd never seen. She whispered, "If I tell him, he'll leave me." "Then he leaves you knowing the truth," I said. Not a lie. The air in the kitchen felt electric, like right before a storm. Finally, she nodded. "Tomorrow," she said. "I'll do it tomorrow." And so I waited. Tomorrow turned into 2 tomorrows, then a week. She kept saying she was waiting for the right moment after dinner, after the house sold, after Dad wasn't tired. Meanwhile, I could barely stand to be in the same room with either of them. Until one night, the moment found us. We were eating takeout Chinese, cartons spread across the table, when Dad asked casually, "Why have you been so quiet lately?" He was looking at me, chopsticks hovering in midair. I froze. My mother's face went pale. The silence stretched, and then she said softly, "There's something I need to tell you." It was the first time I'd ever seen my father drop his chopsticks. What followed was not dramatic shouting. No slammed doors, no screaming match. It was worse. Quiet questions, long pauses, my father's voice trembling like a loose wire as he asked her to explain. She did, in the same calm, matter-of-fact tone she'd used with me, but this time her words landed like knives. I sat there, barely breathing, as my father's face fell apart in front of me. He didn't yell, he didn't curse. He just asked, "Why?" over and over, like the word might eventually build a bridge between the two of them. When it was over, he stood up, left his plate half full, and walked outside. He didn't come back for 3 hours. That night, I heard him moving into the guest room. The next morning, he was gone before breakfast. My mother tried to act normal, making coffee, buttering toast. But the air had changed. Even the dog wouldn't settle, pacing back and forth as if he could sense the fracture. In the weeks that followed, everything fell into categories. What we knew, what we admitted, and what we tried not to think about. My father stayed distant but polite. He moved his things into storage without fanfare. My mother looked smaller every day, like the truth was draining her body of shape. And me? I kept thinking about the diary, about how 100 pages of paper had detonated a family, about how a secret, once written down, is never really gone. It just waits for someone reckless enough to read it. I wish I could say there was a clean resolution, that my parents divorced quickly or reconciled fully, that my siblings and I agreed on one version of events. But the truth is messier. We're still in the middle of it, navigating conversations that feel like walking barefoot over broken glass. Sometimes I wonder if I should have left the box unopened. But then I think of my father's face that night, the moment he knew, and I realize, secrets don't rot quietly forever. Eventually, something forces them into the light. Months have passed since that night at the table. The house sold. Boxes scattered to new addresses. My father rented a small apartment across town, sparsely furnished but immaculate, like he needed clean walls to breathe again. My mother stayed in the old town, quieter than I've ever known her. They haven't filed for divorce, but they live separate lives, orbiting around holidays and birthdays like uneasy planets. For me, the journal is gone. I burned it in my sister's backyard fire pit one evening when the air was cool and forgiving. We watched the pages curl into black lace, words disappearing into smoke. I thought I'd feel lighter. Instead, I just felt neutral, as if the weight hadn't left, but changed shape. Family dinners are awkward. My brother tries to play mediator. My sister glares at both parents in turn, and I mostly sit there thinking about how fragile truth is, how you can live decades in a house, believing in its walls, only to learn one night that they were hollow all along. I don't hate my mother. I don't hate my father either. What I feel is harder to name. It's something between grief and reluctant acceptance, a recognition that people are capable of love and betrayal at the same time, and that sometimes those truths live side by side for years without collapsing. If there's a lesson in all this, it's not clean. Secrets always find their way out, but so do the jagged edges they leave behind. And families, well, they don't break neatly. They just crack, and you spend the rest of your life deciding whether to tape the pieces together or admit you'll never drink from that cup again.